Um, I guess my first question to you, describe the moment right after the shooting happened. What went through your mind?
Well, as for me, it was my very first officer-involved shooting in almost 15 years on the department. So the first thing that went through my mind in that moment was trying to process the shooting itself right after that moment.
Okay. And for you?
Directly afterwards, and when you say after, is it going down to the headquarters or
Like,
as soon as the shots were completed?
As soon as the shots were completed.
My initial reaction was to make sure we got inside and just try to preserve life. That was my objective. As soon as we got inside, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. I rushed in. Everybody was taking their time putting gloves on, and I didn't care about that. At that exact moment, I was more worried about making sure that, regardless of what had happened, that we can still preserve her life, because she's still a person. I mean, that's what happened for me immediately afterwards. Then a couple minutes passed, that everybody started being able to work on her, and that's when I was able to step away, prepare myself a little bit better, get gloves on, clean my hands, get gloves on, and retrieve more medical equipment. That was my immediate action after the shots, to answer the question.
For me, it was along the same lines. I remember immediately thinking, like, dang, she really made me do this. Because, I mean, it's pretty evident police officers don't go to work wanting to gun down people. We're forced to do that when we're faced with a deadly threat. It's what we have to do to go home. And so my immediate thought was, dang, she really made me do that. And then I remember watching everybody go in, and I immediately thought, okay, now we have to go, provide medical attention. Doesn't matter if she just tried to kill us, tried to kill other officers, we have to save her life. It's like the number one thing that police officers are trained to do, and it's why we become police officers, or that's why we became police officers. So that's why I hurdled over the railing and tried to put on some gloves, and there was, plenty of cooks in that kitchen working on her, trying to save her life, and that was the two main things that I remember thinking of initially.
One of the things that I try to get across is within the department before is that we go through firearms training throughout the academy, and you do that training throughout the academy. But at our yearly in-service, we really don't do any training as far as moving threats. So all of our firearms training is everything stationary, a standing target, and so I remember trying to stress from before the shooting that I think we need some of that training throughout the academy, because one thing I know, kind of going back to your question, the thing that I remember is automatically becoming in survival mode. Like, I have to fend for myself in this moment, having to make this split-second decision. And the unfortunate thing about that is that survival mode never went away. It lasted for almost 2.5 years after that.
What have the last few years been for you? Watching all of this play out on TV, everybody having opinions, and at the end of the day, you're the one that had to sit in that courtroom and defend yourselves.
I smile just because last night I went around the city for a late night bike ride at almost 1 a.m. I was stressed, not from no longer having stress. My whole life was in a perpetual state of stress. My son, at the time this incident occurred, was 6-7 months old. I remember getting a call from the cleat attorney asking me, hey, just come and turn yourself in. And my heart sank to my chest. I was so confused. I walked upstairs. My wife was bathing her son, and I had to look at her and my 6-month-old son to tell them that I'm gonna go get arrested. And the whole reason in that moment when I made the decision to protect myself that night, that was one of the last things I thought about, was going home and seeing my wife and my son, and living in that constant state of fighting to be there for him, being able to make sure he grows up to be a good man, a good member of society, all those things to guide him in that right direction. I lived in a constant state of fear, not knowing if I was going to be there for him or not. And that's what I've had to live with for the past 870 something days. And you know, everybody has their opinions, everybody can say what they want, which is perfectly fine. You have the right to do that. But that was probably what kept me going, that kept me strong. Definitely got a lot closer to God. There wasn't a time that I didn't ask for a sign and I didn't get it. And I, just like anybody else would have faced this, I would hope head high and confidently, because we like Sergeant Flores said, we were trained to do things the way that we're supposed to do them. And that night, I was completely oblivious to the fact that if we did anything wrong, because I didn't feel like we did anything wrong. And, you know, having your whole world turned upside down like that it was a rough one to get through, but we made it through. And thankfully we had a lot of support along the way, and a good support system just all the way around.
Same for you. I mean, you've been watching the news.
Sure.
You've watched the coverage.
Absolutely. One of my biggest prayers has always been for these last 800 plus days is that the right information, the facts, and the evidence be out there, not only for ourselves, for our community, but also on behalf of Melissa Perez's family, because I don't doubt that there was some misinformation passed over. So going into trial, I mean, nobody wants to go into trial. That's one of the most scariest things, especially when you know that you did your job. There are just too many risk factors as a supervisor that, hey, we're just going to walk away. We're just going to delay an arrest. I think federal rulings as well as this criminal case prove that we had all these circumstances. But going back to your question, I believe that going into trial actually presented that where all this misinformation and false narratives were absolutely eliminated, because all these things that were said about us made us out to be these monsters that we're really not, because of these stories that were running around.
And for you, same thing, watching the coverage, what were you thinking when you're seeing this? This is you. This is not some guy that you went to arrest that's now up for trial. This is you.
For me, it was a little different. Maybe it's because of my, I guess, personality. I remember being extremely upset at the rhetoric and the false narrative that was being put on display against us. Like they said, we were portrayed as these monsters, as these terrible men in uniform who, gunned down this woman in her apartment, and that's maybe 0.5% of what actually happened. And all that misinformation allows people to form an incorrect opinion, because everyone in this free country is entitled to an opinion. But I believe that in order to form an opinion, you might need all of the facts. And so, having this rhetoric put out there that we are these evil men and we need to be held accountable, with absolutely no facts was really difficult for me and my wife. I've always been the kind of person that I don't really care what other people think. My wife is the complete opposite. She cares a lot about what other people think. And so it was difficult for me seeing her struggle with the fact that, she sees me, and I hope she sees me as this perfect man. But she sees me as a perfect man, and to her, the rest of the world sees me as this evil monster. And it's difficult for her to accept the fact that, that's not true. And so that's what was really tough for me over the 29 months. Watching my family, watching my brother, my parents, go through it. I remember when for me, Carl called me, the cleat attorney, he called me as me and my wife were pulling in to grab some food after being up all night at homicide. And I answered on my truck as we're parking, and he had to break me the news, and he broke it to me over speaker on the truck. So my wife, she heard the whole conversation between me and Carl, and I mean, she broke down immediately, and so that gave me no time or chance to break down myself. Having to hold, one of us has to hold it together, and so he told me he'd call me right back, and I had to call my brother, who happened to be working in Canada at that time, and he had to, his world was also flipped upside down, having to fly back down, and it was just awful. My parents live in Houston, and they're a little bit older, so I was worried about them, and how would I break the news to them that your son is about to get arrested for murder, with the shooting having happened less than 24 hours before. And so I had to coordinate all of that. Thankfully, I have incredible friends and incredible family members who were there to support us when we had so many people kind of turn their back on us, like Danny Diaz turned his back on us, things like that. It was good for us to or at least for me to have family to be able to be there for my parents when I had to break the news to them. So it was tough having to go to court once a month, and every single time it would come up, it was the same thing over again. Officers, bad officers do this, evil officers do that, and it was just difficult for me to watch my family's name get dragged through the mud without all the facts being out. Once the facts were laid out on display, I mean, that's why we got the right and just verdict that we did.
You touched on the training. Do you think policy and training were followed that night? And what do you think needs to change? You touched upon it a minute ago. What do you think needs to change, and was everything followed?
For myself, absolutely. We followed everything according to policy. There is no doubt in my mind. Myself, along with 12 other officers, 2 other supervisors, you get almost this sixth sense when you're out there. I did patrol for 10 years, and as a detective, I was still out there in the streets. As a supervisor in the streets, you almost get the sense when you know that if you're going to leave a scene with so much going on, what would the story be like? What would that storyline be? We had supervisors on the scene making a decision to leave, and then all these things just fall apart. I do want to touch on something, if it's okay with you. I was thinking to myself earlier today. I'm a big believer about. I believe that there's nothing that passes through our lives that doesn't carry meaning and purpose. So my biggest prayer out of the result of all this is that maybe change will come, that our situation can be used so that true change could come, so there will not be another officer having to go through something very unjust, not only for ourselves, but like I mentioned earlier, on behalf of Melissa Perez's family as well too.
What needs to change? What's the change you want to see?
Well, it's very simple. Making a very thorough investigation, not making a decision just based on optics or on the way something may appear. It's a very simple process.
For me, it's in a very lack of better words, it's laziness. There's these officers. I'm not bashing all of them. There are many good officers that are out there, but there's a laziness to do your job. This job is meant for the people of the community. Going out there, making sure you find every detail, treating their lives as lives, that this affects them beyond the scope of just an arrest, because that's what some officers look for, is just to make arrests. They don't think about the consequences that happen to somebody's life afterwards. There needs to be more due diligence that needs to be taught to all. I honestly don't think you can teach that. That's something that you have to be raised with.
And you've gone through this now.
Yeah.
Does that give you more empathy for the people that are out there
I've
that
always
you serve?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I've always had empathy for anybody that I've come into contact with. I'd stop at little kids' birthday parties so that they could see that we're part of the community. In the video shows, I don't want to make people's lives harder. People have hard lives as it is. My job as a police officer is just to keep the peace, make sure what needs to be done has to be done, and what doesn't need to be pressed doesn't need to be pressed. Like I said, people's lives are hard. So, and like I said, I don't think you can teach that, but that definitely needs to be something that individuals look at moving forward with their career, that this is more than just an arrest. This is somebody's life. This goes far beyond the scope of what your job is. The second thing is, and I say this respectfully to the command staff, is have faith in your officers. Whatever you teach them, you're teaching them what they need to do to go home. I went home that night. I'm glad I got to go home that night. And not be afraid to stand by your officers. When you teach them so many hours of TCOL, tactics, everything else, and they go out there and do the job that you showed them how to do, have confidence in them. That's what I think needs to change. Is not be so quick to be judged by what everybody else thinks or says. Is to stand firm in what your practices are, and being by the ones that are going out there every night, fighting to keep the city from, like Lahud said, going to Gotham.
And for you, was policy and training followed that night, and what things need to change so we don't see another case like this?
Policy was followed that night. It's clear cut. It's very black and white. Policy was 100% followed that night. I think, to kind of piggyback off of what Nate said, it's, have faith in that your officers are doing the right thing. I think Nico said it pretty clearly during trial. Do what's right, not what's easy, and that carries a lot of weight. You have people in positions who have a lot of authority, a lot of power. The upper echelon, the administration, they have a lot of power and authority when it comes to training and making decisions that affect individual officers and their families. And they chose to do what was easy, which is, throw them to the wolves, lock the door, and best of luck to you. But they didn't do what was right. They chose the easy option, and it reflects on the kind of person and character that they are. And that can be said about so many people who made those decisions. There was a laundry list of people whose names were checked off when making this decision, and they failed to do what was right. They just did what was easy, and they wanted to use us as scapegoats and say that we needed to be held accountable. But who's holding them accountable for not doing the right thing? Like I said earlier, Danny turned his back on us because that's what was easy, not what was right. The same thing with the decision, the rush decision to judgment. That's always the easy option. It's always super easy to just kind of kick somebody out and lock the door on them and be on your way, but it's not what's right. And I think in order for change to happen within the department, that mentality, that culture needs to change. And I say that having so many incredibly great friends on the department. Some of the best friends I have here in the city of San Antonio are police officers to this day. They're great officers. They deserve better. This department, this city is beautiful. I'm from Houston. This city is wonderful. I chose to apply to SAPD because, and not knocking on HPD, I believe the SAPD was better than HPD. And so I came here, and this is where my son is going to grow up and hopefully have a wonderful life. So I believe that the city of San Antonio has an incredible potential, an incredible culture, wonderful people, and it sometimes doesn't reflect adequately with the way the police department is doing its practice. And so in order for that to change, the culture needs to change, and it has to change sooner rather than later, before other officers are put in the predicament that we were put in, with a quick decision made in under 6 hours to have us arrested.
Why do you think this was decided so quickly? Why do you think they went to the DA's office so quickly? Do you feel that it was very quickly? Obviously, I'm going to answer that for you. You do. Why do you think they decided so quickly to charge you?
Well, when we were called to turn ourselves in, the first thought that I thought about, there's just no way. As a detective, I process crime scenes, so I knew there's just no way in the world that they were able to process everything, especially and an officer-involved shooting in a very short period of time. I'm not sure if they were just thinking, well, we'll just deal with it later on. I mean, it just, the optics look really bad. I'm sure that they're going to end up finding them guilty. I mean, convict these officers? I don't know. The only thing that I can think of is just the way it appeared. And I'm glad and I'm happy that the trial actually brought all the evidence and all the facts to disprove what, on the way that it did not appear. That makes sense, you know.
For me, I like I said, my world was turned upside down initially that day. That rush to judgment was what I assumed was that section, that department has everything they need. From, when I say everything, there's this, we're police officers, everything is documented. So first thing I assumed was something so egregious happened that I was unaware of, that it just, I mean, I would trust them that they were doing the right thing as far as calling us, that they maybe knew something that I didn't know. It wasn't later on until the speculation of politically driven motives were the cause of that. But I mean, I just couldn't, like I said, I couldn't really grasp the understanding of that, other than something that they knew something I didn't know. That's the best answer I can give you for that.
The same to you. Why do you think, with that timeline, that you were charged so quickly?
I think it goes back to the doing what's easy over what's right. It was very easy for him to make that decision because they wouldn't have to answer the difficult questions. They would be able to avoid having to face the media or the public, the community, and answer those difficult questions. So it's honestly, for lack of a better word, it's a lack of courage on their part. You know, you are in positions of authority that have huge amounts of responsibility, and with that responsibility comes the fact that you have to answer those difficult questions. When a team is losing, when a team has been losing their first 6 games in a row, who's up at the podium answering the difficult questions? The coach, the guy in charge. He doesn't avoid the media. He doesn't say, oh, you know what, today I don't feel like answering questions. No, he stands up there with his head high and answers the questions on behalf of his team. And we weren't afforded that luxury. We were told, you know what, you're out of here. You guys can figure it out on your own, without being aware of the ramifications that it had, not just on our livelihood, but our families. You know, our names and our faces are going to be on the internet in a day and age where the internet exists. We have more internet, more power in our phones now than we did when we landed on the moon. So we're just a Google search away, and no matter that we were found not guilty, our faces are still going to be plastered up forever. Our mugshots are going to be out there forever. My son, when he goes into college and begins having to do research on papers, he's going to Google, his dad's name, and even though it happened 20 years ago, he's going to see, oh my God, that's my dad. And it's terrible for them to not even consider that when taking the easy route instead of the right route.
And if I can add to that, with all that Google search and all those stories that will be out there, will be with all the misinformation. And that just doesn't make it fair. It doesn't.
So let me ask you about that. I mean, what does the acquittal mean to you?
Well, for me, the biggest thing, like I mentioned, one of the things that were going through my mind, if this case were to be dismissed before trial or to be thrown out or that kind of thing, well, it wouldn't present the opportunity for all the facts and the evidence to be out there. I mean, 21 days of trial. I mean, our defense team did a very, very great job in being very thorough. And while I'm in there sitting in trial, I'm thinking to myself, some of these theories that are being brought up about it's okay to use deadly force against a police officer if they're trying to unlawfully arrest you by entering into your residence. I'm thinking to myself, as a supervisor, as a sergeant, what are all these supervisors having to tell our patrol officers at roll calls? Are they having to convey? You may not want to, they can use deadly force if you're trying to make an arrest. So all these things are kind of going through me. But the fact that all these things were ruled out, and again, the facts and the evidence being presented, I'm praying that for us, we find closure. But like I mentioned earlier, also the family, Melissa Perez's family will also find closure throughout this whole process, as well as other officers within the department that might have been hearing different narratives of what actually went on, because that's the other hard thing throughout this whole ordeal. There are just stories circulating as well throughout the department of things that happened that didn't happen, and that's hard in itself too as well.
For me, what this acquittal means is it's definitely it's an opportunity to learn from this, because there's so many things that can be made better, from policing to crisis intervention.
Yes.
There's so many things that can be taken away from this, and that's like how this has been going is, from how policing is done, the investigations being thorough, as to how to respond to certain calls. There's so much learning opportunity that comes from this. But for me, what the acquittal means most is that I get to get back to my life. They don't talk about how hard it is to get a job after they drag your name through the mud when you go to the grocery stores and people are staring at you because they recognize you. I'm a 6'1" individual in San Antonio, but I stick out like a sore thumb. It's not, and I grew up on the South Side, so everybody knows my family on the South Side, knows me. They know who I am. They've always said that I'm a good person, everything else like that. But from one day to the next, I felt like the world changed on me, and now I feel like I can walk back out in public and not be scrutinized or demonized by everybody that I come across. But there's so many things that this means to me, and those are just a few of them.
Okay. Same thing. What does the acquittal mean to you? And you just hit it on the nose. This will live forever on the internet. Your child will be 20 years old and Google his dad's name, and this will show up again on the internet.
The acquittal for me is pretty much, what Nate said, except for the part where he's 6'1", because I'm 5 foot even. So, on the contrast, people recognize me. They see, oh my God, that's that short officer who was in that shooting. They recognize me. Anywhere you go, your face is all over the internet. So, people can see you, now with, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, your face is everywhere. And now with this acquittal means, for me specifically, and I told my family on Monday, this acquittal wasn't for me. It was for them. For them to be able to say, okay, my son, my husband, my brother, my friend, he's going to be around for, hopefully until I'm 100, right? He's going to be around. No more living in limbo. No more wondering if I'm going to make it to my son's birth. And no more wondering if I'm going to be at my dad's retirement party. That awful state of limbo is terrible, and I don't wish it upon my worst enemy. And I don't think that's something that was ever thought of when they made the easy decision as opposed to the right decision. So, this acquittal just means that I can hold my head as high as I can, being 5 foot even. I can go out into the world and tell the world what I already knew, that I was innocent from the beginning, that this was a rush to judgment, a poor investigation, a politically driven decision. All of that, I can hold my head up high, knowing that that's out there now. Whether people want to look at that or not, that's on them. And this acquittal was for my friends and my family members who supported me through the most terrible 29 months of my life. They stood behind me, stood next to me, supported me, checked in on me whenever, they were like, hey man, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Those are the people that this was for. And I'm just lucky I had an incredible support system, and I'm sure my buddies here did too. I have, an incredible wife who literally held me up when I most needed it. I would break down from time to time in our living room, in our kitchen, when the thought of, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be around for my 30th birthday. I don't know if I'm gonna be in prison when I'm 33. These are things that good ordinary officers shouldn't have to wonder. It's appalling for somebody to make such an unjust decision with other people's lives. We're not pawns. We're human beings. We have families. The day I got arrested, I had to go turn myself in immediately. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my dogs. I remember sitting in the cell with these two guys, and Nate, it was like, man, I didn't even get to say goodbye to my son, and I said, man, I didn't even get to say goodbye to my dogs. Obviously completely different things, right? But it was just terrible. My wife held me up as whatever she had going on in her world, in her life, she held me up, and I was lucky enough to have an incredible wife. I have a younger brother who did the same in a sense, and incredible friends on the department who, police officers or not, they've gone to bat for me. Incredible friends that I've known for 15, 20 years from Houston. This acquittal was for them. It was never meant for me. I knew I was justified from the beginning. It was for them.
Absolutely. And I go back to saying it would have been just a few simple words from our leadership. We have an initial investigation in this officer-involved shooting. That's all. So that a proper investigation would have been done, and all this would have been prevented.
With that said, I got a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. What would you want to say today to her family?
From the bottom of my heart, from my family to hers, we're so sorry for your loss. I pray that they find healing. I pray that they find the strength to keep moving forward, and just to love themselves. And no matter what had happened throughout this whole entire ordeal, I extend nothing but my sincerest condolences and just love overall to them. And they can hate me, they can think whatever they like of me, but I will never hold anything against them. And it's just very sincere when I say I love y'all, and I hope that y'all can heal. That's what I would like to say.
I would like to say that since day one, we've been praying for the family. And I'm praying that this interview, along with the trial itself, would help for healing and closure on behalf of their family.
Well, for me, it's the same. It's my deepest condolences. Nobody wants to take another person's life. That's just, as another human being, we never dream of that. And I hope that they find their way back home. Like Tom said, I hope that they continue to heal and continue to cherish the moments that they were able to share with her and focus on those. And hopefully the trial helped them find some sort of closure. And if that closure for them is to hate all three of us, then so be it. I'm no one to say who someone can and cannot hate. If that's what they need to continue to move on, then I have no problem them doing that. I just hope that they know that I extend my deepest condolences and that I am terribly sorry for their loss. And I hope that they find closure one day.
Do you want to go back to SAPD?
That's a tough question. With the right circumstances, as far as being able to do my job, be trusted to do my job, absolutely. I love serving my community. As much as I didn't like some of the people that were not thorough in serving their community, besides all of that, you ultimately, you do it for a reason. I did it because I genuinely loved helping out the community, and I loved making sure that I could make people's lives easier, especially with all the stigma with law enforcement and everything else like that. Every time I talk to any of my friends, like I said, I grew up on the South Side, so a lot of the times we get F-bombs with police, and I really wanted to change the narrative on that. So if the opportunity does present itself, I'd love to go back to serving my community.
Do you want to go back to SAPD?
Being 2 days after the acquittal, it hasn't even crossed my mind. I think I'm just trying to process everything in, and more importantly, process the incident in itself. Because like I mentioned, the morning that we woke up after the incident, we had to turn ourselves in. So I've never been able to get an opportunity to even process the incident in itself.
Wow. Do you want to go back to San Antonio Police Department?
I'm going to say this as respectfully as I possibly can. Absolutely not. The only way I'd ever go back is if the city manager appoints me chief. And that's never going to happen. I resigned back in December of 2023. So, once again, the rhetoric and the narrative of, these 3 officers are going to go back to the department with back pay and full benefits. Well, that's actually impossible for me, because I resigned from the police department. I have no more affiliation with the city of San Antonio or SAPD outside of the extremely good friends that I have on the department, but there's no way I'm going back.
Anything else I didn't ask you? And I keep looking at you and I've spent a lot of time with officers. I was embedded with the gang unit for 3 months and 1 year. I see what you guys do, and I see what the supervisors do. You're standing there that night and you have younger officers, and the sense of responsibility you must have felt that night.
Absolutely, especially when we had to turn ourselves in. I knew my officers, they just started their families. I know Nathaniel has a young child, I believe he's a year or 2 years old, and Eleazar is expecting a little one. And these are just some of these memories. They just can't go back if the arrest never did happen. So throughout this whole time, I had just been praying and hoping, not only for myself, but for these 2 individuals. When the verdicts were read, and they read mine first, yes, it was a sign of relief. But I knew that going into theirs, I wouldn't be okay if theirs wasn't okay. There's just no way in the world. So, yes, absolutely, I agree with you.
And you want to say anything about your attorneys? Because I know what we were all saying when we saw the attorneys, who they were. Not everyone can afford to have this type of attorney in their case. What do you have to say about them?
If you don't mind if I begin with that one. And I'm sure that this will probably be omitted from the interview.
Oh, we're planning on putting it on the website. So.
Well, okay. Well, there's a scripture that says in Psalm 118, verse 7, that the Lord is among those who help us. So in seeing each and every of these defense attorneys and what they had to do, and the only thing they did was bring truth to light. That's what they were used for. Bring all the evidence, the facts, and the truth. And seeing that, I couldn't be more honored than to have the defense team on our side.
Same to you.
He couldn't have said it better than myself, but this firm, this group of people have taken me in as if I was their own. They know about my family, they know my son, they know my hopes and dreams, and they believed in that, and they wanted to, they believed in that with just everything that they had, and they fought tooth and nail to make sure that I could be there to pursue the dreams that I have in my life, and they're just beyond great. It's one of the most memorable experiences I'll ever have in my life, being able to sit beside them and watch them do what they do so well.
Same to you.
Yeah, one of the first few things that Ben told me was, I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you. And that was kind of his little motto that he would tell me. I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you. I'm not gonna let anyone hurt you. And he took sort of a kinship to me, and he always calls me his little brother, despite our age gap. And him, Mario, Jacob, Alex, they were absolutely amazing. I've told this to them so many times. As tragic as this event was, I'm so happy I was able to meet meet them. They are just some of the most incredible people. Same with Nico and Jay. You know, these are people that I would probably never meet, and I was blessed enough to have encountered them under unfortunate circumstances. You know, Tom, you know, being Canadian, I don't think I'd ever meet Tom. Same with Christian. I don't think I'd ever come across these amazing, incredible individuals who, you know, they love to say how great police officers are, but, you know, I think they deserve a pat on the back too. I mean, they are absolutely the best at what they do, from top to bottom. You know, Tom, Christian, Nico, Jason, Jay, Patrick, you know, Ben, Mario, Jacob. They're just incredible human beings who have a special place in God's heaven. They are just some of the most incredible human beings one could ever meet. And Alex. God forbid I forget her, Alex. Yes.
So anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to include in here?
I think I've said everything I needed to say. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Are you hoping and dreaming again?
A little bit. It'll slowly come back, but it's like a second lease on life. I mean, I don't know what I want to do yet, but I know whatever I want to do, I can do it.
As a former San Antonio police sergeant, but also as a human being, the only thing I'm asking is leadership out there in the department, do what they have to do to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen to our future generation of police officers. We don't deserve this.
Anything you want to say to Chief McManus?
Just the leadership.
Okay. Anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to add?
No, I just want to point out, you know, how incredible my support system has been through all of this. And I received over 100 text messages on Monday, and I tried to get to all of them. I think I did my best. But, you know, my support system knows who they are, and I am so incredibly grateful for them, and I will never cease to stop thanking them for that. You know, they're going to be in my life forever as my support system, and I'm just incredibly grateful for them.
All right. Well, we're good. You sure nothing else you wanted to add?
Only thing to piggyback on what Alejandro said is I just want to thank the community, everybody that's been behind us the whole entire way, not just our families, but most importantly our families. We thank y'all for trusting us. It means a lot to stand with people, even though the current opinion isn't in their favor. So for those that do stand behind us and support us, at least from the bottom of my heart, and I can imagine they would attest as well, thank you. It means so much, and it makes doing our job a whole lot easier.